So I started to just say I'm a retired internist and geriatrician. I first came to this community in 1965 as a young naval officer. The submarine base was my first duty station, and I did the submarine thing for 5 years, and then I went to medical school at the University of Connecticut. And thereafter I went to New York for my training, internship, and residency, and then worked down there for several years, and then came back here and took over the office of a retiring physician in New London, and I ran the practice in New London for 35 years with my partner Naomi Nomizu, who maybe some of you have heard of her. She's an excellent physician. And then I did nursing home work as well. So I retired in 2015, and I joined this organization called the Mystic Geriatrics Institute, which is the sponsoring organization for this series. And lately we've worked in cooperation with the Pawcatuck Neighborhood Center, and most recently with the Groton Public Library, to bring this important body of information to people like yourselves who are perhaps even now taking care of a loved one. I'm sure this information you're going to find very useful. And I am very happy to introduce Maeve Guidera, who is a registered dietitian and a faculty member at Johnson & Wales. Yep. And I'd like to turn the floor over to her so she can give you a little bit of her background, and then she's going to be giving the main portion of the presentation, and I'm going to be helping her out. If you have any questions, here's my request. If there's a question of a personal nature, if you're talking about your own loved one, we'll save that until the end when the cameras are off and when the microphone and the recording is off, because I don't want to bring out any personal information that's recorded, but we can talk about that later. And the other thing is, remind me, when you ask a question, the microphone can't pick that up. So either Maeve or I will try to remember to repeat your question, because I know you've all been to conferences and talks where somebody in the back of the room gives a question, the person up front starts answering it, and you think to yourself, well, what were they talking about? So we're going to try to avoid that. It's an easy mistake for any speaker to make, to try to answer the question and not repeat it, but we will honestly try to repeat each of your questions. And with that, I'm going to introduce Maeve.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Maeve Guidera, and I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. As Dr. Morren mentioned, I work at Johnson & Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm the director of their undergraduate nutrition program. So that's for students who are on their path to becoming registered dietitian nutritionists. I am an alum of Johnson & Wales University, so I am also a culinary nutritionist, meaning that I had gone to culinary school and I can apply nutrition science and culinary arts together, which is quite helpful when counseling patients and clients. So I'm looking forward to doing this presentation with everybody because, as we know, nutrition is instrumental in our health, and it's so important for caregivers to understand how they can support their loved ones and elders in a realistic and attainable way. So I hope that you get some information out of this. And as Dr. Morren said, we will have a session for questions afterwards. And if at any point you cannot hear us, let us know, and we'll be sure to pull the microphone closer to our mouths.
If there are general questions that don't involve any personal information, don't hesitate to ask those questions in real time so that we can get into that, because really the most interesting subjects really come up from the audience, the things that you really want to know about. So please, as long as it's not a personal information, we'll try to deal with it in real time.
Great. Okay, so some of the topics that we will be covering today is we will be discussing dietary patterns, weight management and monitoring, which is crucial with this community, exercise in the geriatric community, and then we'll have a case study that we'll go over, in the beginning of or throughout the middle of this presentation, and then we'll close out with it again. And then, as Dr. Morren said, any questions that you do have throughout, don't hesitate. However, if it is more personal, wait until the end to ensure that we're not breaching upon anyone's privacy. Okay, first of all, so dietary patterns. And when we talk about dietary patterns, we're referring to the quantities, the proportions, and the variety and combination of the different foods that you are consuming throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. And so what you'll find is there are illustrations, such as these two here, that help individuals to understand simply the types of foods you should try to incorporate into your diet on a regular basis and the amounts. This here is something that's called MyPlate, and this is created by the USDA. And MyPlate is a recommendation for those in the United States of America. So this is a very general representation of a general pattern of what you should look for as you're building your plate or your diet when you're choosing what to eat. So what I want to first call out is if you look at the half here, so that's fruits and vegetables. So when you're looking to build your plate for your meals, try to fill up half the plate with fruits and vegetables. And then you'll see in the top right, you have your grains. So think of your rice, your breads, there's pastas and also crackers. We always like to say with grains, if you can do whole grains, that's optimal. So that's like your brown rice or your multi-grain bread. However, sometimes it doesn't taste as good or it's not as realistic. So of course your white rice and white bread, that's certainly okay. We want to make sure that you are eating or that your loved ones are eating and that they are getting their calories in. And then the lower quadrant here, so that's protein. So that can be any sort of protein. So there's protein that comes from animal sources, such as your chicken or your beef. Eggs are an excellent source of protein, and they are an excellent food to have on hand. Not only are they generally affordable, however, they can be stored and used in so many different ways. So when you're considering having something easily accessible, consider having like peeled hard-boiled eggs in the refrigerator. That can easily be taken out and eaten as a snack. And it's also so versatile, right? So you can make baked eggs, scrambled eggs. So there's a lot of variety within that. And then I have here for another convenience and also nutritious, your tuna. So having that canned tuna, or now they also have the tuna that's in pouches, which is a little bit easier to open, so you're not having to worry about that can opener. And then shrimp and other seafood. At the top right, we have our dairy. And preferably when you're having your dairy, you want to have the full fat. Again, so that's getting the calories in, because what's so important with this population is maintaining or gaining weight, unless there's a specific situation with a patient. But that's the general idea. And so a great way to get in some of those calories is by choosing full fat dairy products. So that can look like full fat milk, your yogurts, cottage cheese, ice cream even. And also you must keep in mind that we want to think of all the different types of foods that can offer this, where we can work with the different textures that perhaps a loved one may prefer, or they're unable to choose certain foods or swallow certain foods. So it's important to keep in mind the different textures. This here is just an example. So this is from Ireland. So this is what their food pyramid looks like. And it's fairly similar here. Again, they call out the whole grains. You have fruits and vegetables right on the bottom, again, so that's a majority. And this is just really to illustrate how different countries and backgrounds consider the patterns of their population. And so when the USDA creates that MyPlate that I just showed you, those recommendations are based on studies that are done on the population. And based on those studies is how those recommendations come into play. So that is specifically for Americans. And then here we have the Mediterranean diet pyramid. This diet is fantastic. What's wonderful about the Mediterranean diet pyramid, and we will be talking about it later on, is that it is plenty in fruits and vegetables and fish and seafood, and some of these foods that are rich in something called omega-3, and that's a type of fat, or a healthy fat, as you'll hear. So you have your good fats and your bad fats, as people like to say. And what's interesting about this is that their pyramid actually includes physical activity, meal, and family time. And as you're caring for your elder, this is crucial. It is crucial to incorporate some form of exercise, whether it's simply stretching on a chair or it's practicing walking up and down stairs, whatever you can do to have them engaged and active. And then it's involving them in a mealtime and having that conversation and helping them to, and that's a time where you can really notice, how are they eating, how are they feeling. It's crucial to how they feel. It's going to impact, obviously, their mind and depression and how they're feeling, but also what they're eating. Okay, so as I mentioned, when we discuss weight management, contrary to what some may believe, it's important to either maintain weight or to gain weight. We need to be sure that individuals are maintaining their weight. So it's important that you monitor their weight. And so a way that you can do that is by monitoring their weight weekly. And you can use a digital scale. They have them at Walmart or any of stores like that. They're fairly inexpensive. You can order them from Amazon, probably $20 or less at this point. So it's important to keep track of that weight. That way you can see if they're gaining weight or losing weight, because that can be an indicator of a number of things, which Dr. Morren would go into deeper. And as I said, although most people these days are overweight, it's not as concerning for the overall health of this population unless otherwise stated by a physician.
I can just add a little bit here. Why do you need that extra weight? And I have a little bit of extra weight. You need that extra weight for when you get into trouble. And older people do get into trouble. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that with your older relatives. They need surgery, or they break a hip, or come down with pneumonia, any one of a number of things which causes them to temporarily decrease their nutritional intake. And that reserve of weight that they have, both in terms of muscle and fat, may be the thing that allows them to survive their illness or their surgical recovery. So that's why we thought it was important to bring up the fact that weight loss in the elderly population is not as important as it is in the younger population. And the younger population, being overweight, can actually cause problems such as diabetes and heart disease, which a younger person really has to work to avoid. But in an older person, just the opposite is true. A little bit of extra weight is probably a good thing, unless you're grossly obese. Thank you.
Excellent. So when we talk about nutrition and weight recommendations, at this time, there are not specific guidelines for those over the age of 65. However, something that we can use as a calculation is called a BMI. So your BMI is based on many different parameters, which can include the chronic illness and should be decided by your physician. So that kind of gives us a baseline. And if you take a look, we have case, okay, let's go back. So we will touch back on that later, but first we are going to work through a case study presentation. And this is with Aunt Lena.
Do you want me to do that?
Sure.
This is not my Aunt Lena. This is not my Aunt Lena, but I thought, I made up this case as a completely fictional character, but I thought Aunt Lena was somebody we all know. She's an 81-year-old widow who lives alone in her private home. She kept a small garden until recently, but she has lost interest. And now she rarely goes outdoors. She has adult onset diabetes mellitus and uses several medications to control her blood sugar. Last year, she underwent surgery for a hip fracture. You are her niece and her only relative living close by. You visit and notice that she's still in her PJs at noon, and she appears to have lost weight. And you are her medical power of attorney. So just keep Lena in mind, and we'll get back to Lena because we're going to discuss several of the issues that I bring up here, which are sort of red flags for things that are going on that as a caregiver you should be concerned about.
Thank you. So when you're considering the elders and assessing their nutrition, one way you can do this is to plan to eat regularly with them. And notice how much are they eating? Are they having difficulty chewing? Are they having difficulty swallowing? Are their food choices reasonable? Are they as nutritious as you would like? Of course, that's optimal, but however, it's best to get the calories in, like we said. And did they include a wide range of food sources? So if you go back to the beginning when we talked about My Plate and how you had the different food groups, trying to include the different food groups at each meal or snack if possible. And then as we go back also to that Mediterranean diet, which is something that works fantastic for everybody and we like to recommend. It's again having that variety of foods throughout your meals, your days, your weeks. And then another thing that's important to do is checking your refrigerator or the refrigerator. You want to make sure that there isn't any outdated or spoiled food. Ensure that the food is not moldy. So try to take a look at that whenever you are over at their home or wherever it is, and to make sure that that isn't there. And you want to have food that's appetizing and healthy for the loved ones. Oh. Okay, so right before the case study, I had touched on BMI. And so, like I said, the BMI, it categorizes where someone's weight is, whether they are considered obese, overweight, normal weight, or underweight. And this is done with a calculation, and it uses a person's body surface area. So your height and weight are included when figuring out this number here. And there are different online tools that you can use to find out your own BMI. So one is here. If you were to scan this with your phone, it'll bring you to, I believe it's the CDC website, but if you were to just look up online, BMI calculator, make sure that you're using a government website to ensure that it's accurate, and you can just type in your height, your weight. Usually they ask an activity level, and it'll tell you what the different activity levels are, whether you're sedentary or you're active as you're working out 5 days a week, whatever that may be. And then what it will do, it will tell you what your BMI is. So this is the chart that the doctors look at and the registered dietitians that will show you what somebody's BMI or body mass index is. And so if you see along here, the x-axis, you have your weight in pounds, and then you have your height in your inches. And so what you do is consider both, and then you'll find what number you are. So this is the old chart. Okay, so just some reminders again. What you want to do is you want to obtain the baseline weight and checking that weekly. Just keep an eye on it. Make sure that the food choices include fruits, vegetables, and proteins. That's how we're going to get the most variety in the types of nutrients and the vitamins and minerals that you'll need. And again, we want to avoid that weight loss unless the person is obese. And check the refrigerator frequently to remove any sort of outdated food. Okay, so managing obesity. Overweight older people, those whose BMI is less than 30, they do not benefit from weight loss. They tend to do well in terms of overall wellness, though. However, older people should be encouraged to diet to achieve a BMI less than 30. So that's when we say there's that certain and special case of when you'd want to consider losing some sort of weight. And again here, when we talk about our diet and maintaining that weight and including healthy food options, in general, that Mediterranean diet is what we like to recommend. Because there's so many fruits and vegetables, the white meats or those lean meats, and the fish, and then also ensuring to incorporate that physical activity. Fad diets, which you'll hear so much about, so a popular one right now is keto, for example. Those should be avoided. Those are metabolically unsound and they aren't realistic. So even if you hear a lot about it and people may talk about how healthy those may be, you should really be avoiding those. Exercise. So exercise, no matter what form, is important for maintaining health, physically and also mentally and emotionally. And then of course, if you're trying to lose weight, you always want to include exercise. And as I said, it doesn't need to be anything complicated. It can be something as simple, whatever the elder can tolerate. Okay, so unwanted weight loss. Older adults are at risk for weight loss and malnutrition. So different risk factors for losing weight include certain chronic diseases, so diabetes, hypertension, congestive heart failure, and it could also be due to decreased access to food and the inability to prepare food. So this is where you want to be sure that you can have foods that are simple to prepare, like when I said like the hard-boiled eggs, for example, or making a chicken salad or a tuna salad and having it in the refrigerator. There are different grocery stores in the area that have some really great options for prepared meals, such as you have your McQuaid's, the Big Y. Aldi has some great sections of soups that you can easily heat up and refrigerate as well. And so those are things you want to think about. What's something that's easy to prepare, that's easy to grab, and that's offers variety. And you can get a lot of those at different price points too. Also, weight loss can occur because of digestive problems. So you could have poor dentition, GERD, small bowel or large bowel disease, and then we have a note about the gallbladder.
Any of you have gallbladder problems? If you do, then there's a great way of getting rid of your gallbladder, and it's called laparoscopic cholecystectomy. It used to be, when I was in training back in the 1970s, that the gallbladder removal was a big operation, and the surgeon had to cut a great big opening in your abdominal wall. Well, now they do it laparoscopically. Honest to God, I had mine done about 5 or 6 years ago. I went in the morning and I walked out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and went home. I mean, it's just an amazing thing. And symptoms of gallbladder problems are when you eat particularly a fatty meal, you get pain, and it can be anywhere in your abdomen, but oftentimes in the right upper quadrant of the abdomen. And the pain is unrelenting, and eventually it does go away. Any of you who have had gallbladder stones know what I'm talking about. But yeah, the gallbladder, also the malfunction of the gallbladder can interfere with your ability to digest fats. So it's these days a very simple medical or surgical issue to take care of. So any questions about any of the medical aspects of this? I think Maeve has done a wonderful job thus far, but I think weight control is important in certain issues for anybody, and particularly people with these illnesses such as diabetes mellitus, which of course requires a fairly strict diet, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. Hypertension, which requires very careful monitoring of your salt intake, as well as congestive heart failure, requiring very, very, very close monitoring of your salt intake. And of course, there are other medical problems we can get into as the evening progresses, which require certain dietary manipulations, such as osteoporosis, in which you require focus on your calcium and vitamin D intake. But I'll stop for now and let Maeve continue. Any questions from the group so far? I think Frank, a member of our audience, brought up an important topic when we were talking at the back of the room, and I hope we get a chance to go into the subject of how you get an older person to eat their vegetables. So, Frank, I hope we get a chance to get into that.
Thank you. And going back to what Dr. Morren just mentioned about diabetes, for example, and those with diabetes having to have a controlled diet. When we consider needing to get calories and nutritionists, this is something that's called Glucerna, and these are special nutrition supplemental drinks that are controlled for those with diabetes. So it ensures that the sugars and the carbohydrate counts are, safe, I guess I would say, or a better option for those with diabetes. So while nutrition drinks like this are not necessary, they are sometimes a good option depending upon the appetite or how much somebody is eating or not eating or the textures that they are tolerating. So you can often find these, they're in CVS's, I've seen them in Walmart, some grocery stores, and there's a number of different types. So when you're looking at them, you want to be sure that you're paying attention to the types that they are, because they are geared towards certain conditions, and you'd want to clear that with your physician or your registered dietitian nutritionist. So screening for weight loss and malnutrition. A reminder, again, have meals with your loved ones and observe. That's the best way that you're going to be able to observe what they're doing, how are they feeling, and then you can advocate for them when they're in doctor's appointments, and help to communicate certain things that they may not recognize, they may not realize or remember. So it's always good to have an extra set of eyes and ears in situations like that. And then weighing them periodically. Likely you are seeing them more often than they are going to the doctors, so it's important that you can help to monitor that. And then again, that can be another piece of data or information when going to doctors' offices to share with your physician. So when we talk about acute illness, it's important to note that an older person is less likely to gain weight back following an acute illness. When this occurs, or if it occurs, that's when you should consult your physician, because this is important in the healing process, and also just their overall health. And again, there are tests to assess for nutritional status and frailty, and then that is something that your physician will help you identify, and that will help you to create a plan and a course of action to help to remedy that. This is when we talk about causes of involuntary weight loss. So chronic illness can lead to something that's called cachexia, and that's a general lack of nutrition and body wasting. This occurs due to the pro-inflammatory effects of chronic diseases. Illness can also lead to inactivity, which then in turns into something called sarcopenia. And sarcopenia is the loss of muscle mass. Illness may also lead to anorexia or loss of appetite. And it's important to know that when we talk about anorexia, that's simply the loss of appetite. When we're talking about disordered eating, that's anorexia nervosa. So they're two different things. So when we talk about anorexia in the elder adults, it's just simply the loss of an appetite. And then again, it's lack of access to foods. So if somebody's in isolation, or there's certain foods that are difficult to prepare, there are different government agencies that can actually assist in this, and it is part of the handouts here that can help if there are different resources that are needed. Again, that's the lack of finances, the transportation. There can be many barriers to getting the food that you need, so it's important to utilize those resources, understand the resources that are available. So when we talk about monitoring how people are eating and if they're chewing, that's when you want to know, are they swallowing okay? Are they having difficulty swallowing? And what is the cause of that? There's esophageal dysmotility, achalasia, they could have a tumor, it could be the after effects of a stroke, radiation injury, or oral surgery, among others. So that's when you're going to want to take a look at what's the texture of the food, what's the thickness of the food, and that is something, if you're noticing where an elder is struggling with eating in one way or another, that's where you want to raise that to your physician. It could also be due to medication side effects and neurological disorders. So when you consider Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and then again, it's that depression, and that's where that ties back into trying to inhibit depression by engaging with your loved one, bringing them out, having meal times with them, and also any level of physical activity that they can have.
If you notice on a particular visit that your loved one has a decreased appetite, the first thing to ask them is, are you on a new medication? There are lots of medications, and this slide only mentions a few of them, but if you go into any source of adverse reactions, there are so many medicines that cause you to lose your appetite in many ways. Some are hormonal, others are just, some medications just make your mouth taste terrible, and by virtue of that, you lose your appetite. So my lesson to you is that's the first question to ask if somebody has seemed to lose their appetite. Did the doctor put you on something new? Can we go through your medicines? And sometimes that's the easiest solution to solving the problem of loss of appetite and weight loss.
Excellent. And I will say a tip is, if you're able to, is to have a list available of the medications that your loved one is on so that you can refer to it. What's great now is the way that everything's digital. If you're able to have access to medical records digitally, it's a good way where you can see all of the medications that your loved one is on. However, it is gaining access to that, so you of course would need to be approved to do so, but it is a good tool to reference where now everything is in the same place.
One thing that we've left out is depression.
Yeah.
Depression is, and did you mention it here? Yeah,
really quickly, but I think it's
There
important to highlight it.
Depression in the elderly is very, very common, and it's treatable. And really, when you take your loved one into the doctor, they should be screening for depression every visit, and it's very easy. There's a very simple 2-question exam that is a beautiful screening test for depression. So that's another thing. Once you've figured out that there's no new medication, the next question is, are you depressed? Okay, and that's a very important thing that can be fairly easily remedied.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
there also just a loss of the ability to taste, so food doesn't taste good anymore?
Yes, and oftentimes that's due to medication. Now you're talking about something independent of medication. Just yes, in fact, I've recently heard from an individual who has long COVID, and as part of that problem, they developed a loss of taste. Now, COVID is oftentimes causing a loss of smell, but taste and smell are intimately related. It's sort of like you can't have one without the other. And so, I'm sorry. You know, I broke my own rule. I broke my own rule, and nobody picked it up. Okay. We were going to prompt each other if anybody, but the questions that were raised were, is there a condition in which you simply lose your taste? And the answer is there are many causes of loss of taste. Certainly you have to look for a cause. maybe it's just because somebody's not producing saliva anymore in their mouth, and therefore they can't enjoy the taste of food. They can't dissolve the food enough, get the breakdown of food particles in their mouth to the extent that it liberates the taste, the beautiful taste of food. But oftentimes it comes from a loss of sense of smell. And that's got causes that are, as we've mentioned, attributable to illnesses such as viral illnesses like COVID. And I would say that there are antidepressants. There's a small number of many antidepressants actually cause people to lose appetite, but there's a small number that actually help people increase their appetite. And there are also other appetite stimulants. We won't go into the specific ones, but physicians do have the ability to give people medications that increase their appetite. That's usually not what we have to do in the office, but that's a very interesting thing. And the other subject it brings up is, how do you encourage people who, for instance, don't like to eat vegetables to eat the foods that they need to eat, and what do you do if they refuse? So I think that might be a. Well, are there any tricks of the trade that you're aware of to get people to eat what you think they ought to eat?
I mean, it's certainly challenging. Sometimes I do find that if you explain to somebody why what you're encouraging them to eat is good, like an advantage of them having them say, if you try this, you may feel better because X. But also some people just, they're not in the mood, they don't want to be told what to do, and you can't blame them for that. And that could sometimes be a good opportunity for some of those nutrition beverages, just to get some different vitamins and minerals that they may not be getting because they aren't consuming a diet with a lot of variety. But it's a really challenging thing to manage and deal with, but I think it's more continuing to offer versus telling somebody they have to have this. It's you don't want to force them, and I think too, as with this population, you begin to lose a lot of your freedoms and some of your abilities. And so if what you're eating is something that you have your freedom still to say what you want or don't want, you need to foster that. You need to listen. And it's not ideal, but you want them to eat.
Are there ways to sneak nutrients into the foods that they enjoy? For instance, if somebody enjoys an ice cream soda, can you mix in some carrots or some mixed vegetables? No, really, seriously.
Small carrots.
So I will say something that does work well and that I really like to recommend is either a milkshake or a smoothie. Because you could even take like a chocolate milkshake, for example. And when you're making that, you can scoop some chocolate ice cream in, put in your milk, and then throw handfuls of spinach in, raw spinach or baby spinach. And also they now have, or you see the frozen cauliflower in the frozen section, they also now have something called frozen cauliflower rice. And I really like adding those two things into a smoothie or even into a milkshake, because you do not taste it, but you're getting some fiber and you're getting some vitamins and minerals that are necessary. So certainly things like that. There's also pureeing into, like if you have a marinara sauce or something, if you're able to blend in some veggies that you've sauteed. Another way is if you want to prepare a soup that's like traditionally like a cream-based soup, something you can do is add in like a can of cannellini beans and blend that together. So it thickens the soup and it also gives you the beans, which is some protein and fiber and really nutritious. So those are different, I guess, sneaky ways you can do it. Another would be if you're sauteing like a ground beef or a ground chicken or something, for example. Again, it's adding, if you see the cauliflower rice, the frozen cauliflower rice in the the frozen vegetable section. I use that all the time to add into things. So mix that in, and you won't even know that it's there. It's so small, and it takes on the flavor of whatever you're cooking, and that's a great way to sneak in some of those foods.
How about high-protein spaghetti?
Oh, yes, so there are high-protein spaghetti options now. So those spaghettis or pastas are made sometimes with like a chickpea flour, which is incredible because not only do those pastas, compared to some of the alternative or your more traditional pasta, they contain more protein, which is incredibly important when we consider this population, not only because what it offers calorically, but when I just talked about the risk for muscle wasting. A way that we can maintain our muscle is through ensuring that we have enough protein in our diets. So you can find different options of similar foods, and you can try to incorporate those into the diet. Sometimes those pastas, although they're incredible, they can be a little bit more expensive. So it's something I always try to pay attention to. However, Aldi does offer them at a great price point. So I like to go to Aldi for certain things like that. And yeah, that's a great alternative. It's a great alternative. Again, so we are going to weigh the person weekly. I don't want to forget this. Try to record their dietary intake. There's a calorie counter. There's MyFitnessPal that are free that you can download onto your phone. Or if it's simply jotting down on a notebook or something, it doesn't have to be super detailed, just so you can have a general idea of what your loved one is eating and consuming. And again, if you are monitoring the weight and you're talking to your physician or registered dietitian nutritionist, then you can show, okay, this is where we're experiencing some weight loss, and this is the diet that they're consuming, and maybe they can find a gap there or something that could, be causing some sort of issue with weight loss.
Can you give us a thumb rule about how many calories a person should be consuming every day?
So about 2,000 calories, you mean in general? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so about 2,000 calories a day is what we generally recommend around that neighborhood of time. Obviously, some people require more, and some people might be able to require a little bit of less, but we always say try to reach around 2,000 calories. Okay, so when we talk about weight loss, unintentional weight loss of 5% of your body weight or more in 1 year, that's what we look at. That is considered significant weight loss, and that is associated with increased mortality. And again, that should be brought to your physician's attention. And once you are seeing that happen and you work with the physician, they're going to help you to identify the cause and treat it, so give you a plan, obtain help from a registered dietitian nutritionist, and that person, so the registered dietitian, would then calculate that individual's needs specifically, and you'll see there's that emphasis on the protein, so we're looking at protein now again, and also when helping to develop like a diet or a plan, the registered dietitian can work with you on eliminating any sort of dietary restrictions, or eliminating dietary restrictions, whether it's an allergy or something with a medical, interfering with the medication that the elder may be on. But also, like I said here, so if someone needs to follow like a low cholesterol diet, choosing the lower fat foods, or the fats from certain animal sources. So those are instances where that RD can tailor it specifically to the individual.
Now, where would an individual in the community go to find the expertise of a registered dietitian?
Yeah, so there are different clinics in the area where somebody can work with a registered dietitian. Some doctors' offices can refer out to RDs. There are also dietitians that work within clinics that do specialize in certain conditions. There's also online, there's a way that you can search for dietitians within your area, and you know that they're registered dietitians. They have a specific number associated with them, so that you do know that they did the specific training that's necessary to become an RDN. Because I do want to note that a number of people will use the term nutritionist, and anybody can use the term nutritionist. A nutritionist does not need the schooling that's required to become a registered dietitian nutritionist. So you want to be very careful when you're looking for help with nutrition, because registered dietitians, nutritionists have to pass a board exam. They have to go through extensive training, and they're the ones who are really knowledgeable about different disease states and medications, and that is crucial. It is crucial when considering someone's diet.
I think one issue that we haven't brought up yet is actually going shopping with your elder person. Maybe you could, because my sister-in-law, my brother passed away, and my sister-in-law goes to the store, and the things that she likes aren't necessarily the things that are best for her. So whenever we go to her house, we wind up pulling out, as we mentioned before, all the stuff that's out of date. I mean, can you imagine having something in your refrigerator that expired in 2021? Mm-hmm. I mean, it happens, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of you out there haven't experienced the same thing. So a great thing to do for your loved one is to go shopping with them if they're capable of going shopping and seeing what they're putting in the cart.
Yeah, absolutely. And that could also be a form of an activity to do with them. And so you're getting out of the house or wherever they're staying, and you're doing this together. And I also find that when you're trying to incorporate more foods into a diet and there's a level of resistance, sometimes something as simple as letting them choose, let them pick it up, let them see what they want, that can help too. Again, it's all about having that choice. So making a list together, figuring out the foods that they prefer, and then also considering some foods that you would like to also incorporate to ensure that there's a variety of foods, and doing that shopping together. Because sometimes it could simply just be, it's forgetting, it's not really thinking about the next day or the next week, or it can also be overwhelming because as you begin to lose the ability or struggle to prepare your meals, or your memory may be struggling a little bit, it's nice to have that reminder too and someone to help you. So I think doing the shopping together and helping them, and then obviously that can solve any transportation issues, any physical abilities of actually shopping. So it's a great activity to do with a number of benefits. And again, when we go back to that, we want to remember that there are sources of ready-made foods. So there's the local delis, there's your grocery stores. Something you could do is pick up a rotisserie chicken and pull the meat off the bones and then put that like in a Tupperware container. That way they can easily pull that out and have that available. That's a great source of protein. It's healthy, it can remain fresh, and they can add that into a lot of different things. And then also the delis, there's a lot of prepared foods that you can get little packaging. Keep those in the refrigerator, and then of course always checking at each visit or frequently if anything is becoming older, out of date.
Oftentimes as people get older, the idea of keeping their cholesterol at a very low level becomes meaningless, and their nutrition takes on a much greater role in their overall health than the maintenance of a low cholesterol. So please don't hesitate to ask your doctor when you bring your 85 or 90-year-old loved one in. Doc, do they really still need their cholesterol medicine? Can't we get them off of the cholesterol medicine? Sometimes cholesterol medicines, particularly the statins, interfere with people's quality of life. They cause muscle aches. They can cause reduced appetite. So sometimes it's good to just go over that list when you go in with your loved one to see the doctor. Can't we get rid of some of these medicines?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And again, I think that just shows how everything works together and is combined, because if the individual isn't feeling great, they're probably not going to eat, or they're not going to be as happy, and that can lead to a number of effects nutritionally. So I have here on the right side of the screen, so these are examples of high caloric meals and snacks that you can put together. So ice cream, serve the ice cream. It actually has a decent amount of nutrition when you think about it. If you have your milk, you have your vitamin D, you have your calcium, which is very important, especially for women. Cottage cheese and peaches. I love peaches because you can get them canned, or you can have them fresh, or sometimes what I'll do is I'll buy frozen fruit and let it defrost and have it with some cottage cheese or yogurt. It's an affordable way. If you're freezing the fruit, it's not going to go bad. So that's a great option. Cheese and crackers, when possible, choose whole grain crackers. And then again, our sandwiches. So if you see here, we have the 2 pieces of bread, so that's that grain, right? And then if you have whatever protein it is, so that could be your chicken salad, tuna salad, whatever that may be, there's your protein. Here we have some strawberries on the side, so that's filling that fruit piece. And so that's how you kind of want to think about it as you're putting your meals and your snacks together. What are different food groups that I'm putting together? You can do a toast with a nut butter or avocado. And that's, again, your whole grains, and then you're getting fat. And with these whole grains, you're also getting fiber, which is excellent. Hard-boiled eggs, I've said, and nutrition drinks. So that is like what I showed you here. Could be an example. They taste better if they're cold, so serve them over ice. Or you can make milkshakes with these or smoothies. And it's a great way to get nutrition in. That also tastes good, because sometimes they need a little something to make them taste a little bit more tolerable. Now let's talk about vitamins. So vitamins and minerals, there are many supplements on the market. However, we always prefer that you get the vitamins and minerals from food sources when possible. However, we do understand that it's not always possible, and so that's when you want to talk about having certain supplements. But again, similar to medication, it's important that you discuss and determine those supplements with your physician and the registered dietitian, because there is such thing as having too much of a certain type of vitamin, but there's also different interactions with medications. So you want to be sure that you're knowledgeable what you're choosing and what you're giving to an elder.
So certainly, for many older people, they do not get the full range of vitamin intake that they should, and don't hesitate to give them a good multivitamin. I would say, a brand name multivitamin. It can't do harm, and it may do good. That's really, I think, the best way to put it. And as I mentioned before, there are conditions like osteoporosis where you really need to supplement your calcium and your vitamin D. One word of precaution, and that is overuse of any vitamin is probably going to cause problems. Excess vitamin B12 can cause seizures. Excess vitamin D can cause liver damage. I mean, there are a whole range of things. Actually, I had a patient in the Bronx. She was a young woman who loved carrots. Now, it didn't do her any harm, but she ate so many carrots, and she actually put carrots in a blender and drank them, that she came in looking jaundiced. She actually turned orange. Now, it was really amazing, and she just loved carrots so much. I just had to have her to stop eating carrots. But anyway, too many vitamins can hurt you, so that's the lesson there. But a brand name multivitamin may help you, and it's not going to hurt you.
Okay, so as Dr. Morren said, these are specific vitamins in special circumstances that are more commonly needed in this population. So again, the women with osteoporosis or osteopenia, calcium and vitamin D. Alcoholics, vitamin B1 and B12. Vegetarians are going to want B12 because B12 comes from animal sources. And then celiac disease and other malabsorption syndromes, fat-soluble vitamins. So that's A, D, E, and K, or ADAC. So those are ones that you'd probably see more common. And again, you want to be careful of taking too many or too much because there is harm in that. So let's go back to Aunt Lena in the case study. When what are things that were brought to your attention that you want to think about? Do you want me to go back and read it one more time?
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
Aunt Lena is an
Here she is.
81-year-old female. She's a widow. She lives alone in her private home, where she's lived for many years. She kept a small garden until recently, but she lost interest. Now she rarely goes outdoors. She has adult onset diabetes mellitus and uses several medications to control her blood sugar. Last year, she underwent surgery for a hip fracture, so she fell. That's another important thing. Lack of nutrition and sarcopenia often lead to frailty, and that leads to falls. And that is such an important point in maintaining the health of an elderly person, is to avoid falls. Falls lead to trouble. At any rate, that had happened to Aunt Lena, and you are her niece and the only relative that lives close by. You note that at noon she's still in her PJs and she appears to have lost weight. So what we would like you to do is look at the case and say, what might concern you about what you see when you visit her? And what questions might you ask her, and ultimately you might bring to her physician? And then what actions might you consider to improve her condition? So let's start with the things that might concern you, and please feel free to contribute, knowing what we're dealing with here. Anybody have any ideas about what might be going on with Aunt Lena? Yes.
Depression. Yep.
Yes, depression is a big thing. And what made you think of that?
Well, she lost interest in an activity from
She lost interest.
loved all her life. Yep. She did have a fall, but, you know, she was getting to this stage where people can fall.
She had a fall. Very important piece of information. She appears to be depressed. A very important piece of information. And what else about Aunt Lena led you to believe that she might be depressed?
She lost her schedule.
Yeah. Here she is at noontime, and she hasn't even gotten out of her pajamas yet. Well, you've all brought up some very, very good points. So what's the next step? What questions might you ask?
Well, you want to try and control her blood sugar through diet, hopefully, but, you know.
Well, we need to know what her blood sugar is. Maybe she's becoming hypoglycemic. Maybe that's why she fell. Does she have a glucose monitor? Is she checking her blood sugars? Is she getting regular blood tests? Or is she on too little medication? Is her blood sugar too high? Is she urinating out all her glucose? I mean, these are very good questions that you bring up, and the type of things that you ought to be considering. Is she using some kind of aid for walking, like a walker or a cane, to prevent falls? That's a very important thing, because the more she falls, the more likely she is, like the mortality rate among older people who fall is very high over the subsequent 1 or 2 years. So it's very important, particularly if somebody has had frequent falls, because that could be a cardiac issue as well. So what might you do if you were faced with this circumstance, which is really the essence of why you all came tonight, to find out what you would do under these circumstances? Any ideas?
Take her to the doctor.
That's a really good one. Okay. But I think going back through the steps that Maeve has mentioned, go into that refrigerator. Make sure she's not eating bad food. Find out why she has lost her appetite using some of the tools that Maeve has mentioned. Eat with her. See how she eats. See if she's able to chew. See if she's able to swallow. All these points that Maeve has brought up, these are the things that you have to do to make sure that your loved one is not going to continue to lose weight. Yes, ma'am.
You might have to evaluate her living situation. Some furniture may no longer be appropriate. throw rugs may not be a good idea, and that sort of thing. She's 81. We keep things. Do I really need to have this hassock or whatever? Maybe I can eliminate some of the things that are in my way when I am moving about.
Was everybody able to hear that? Because those are very excellent ideas. And in one of the talks, I think it's the last talk, Shayla Adams, who's the physical therapist, is going to discuss preparing the home for the elderly person to avoid things like the throw rugs and the furnitures that might block her segue into the bathroom. She'll also mention modifications of the bathroom to make the bathroom safe for an older person. She'll go over all of that. And occupational therapy. Occupational therapy is a discipline that has to do with exactly what we're talking about, making sure the home is a safe place to live in. And that involves one other thing that Maeve mentioned, and that is having a stove that is user-friendly. And for instance, one idea that'll come up there is having the controls of the stove near the person and not having to reach to the back of the stove. You know how some stoves have the controls over the burners, so you have to reach over the burners in order to adjust the heat. Well, that's not very good for an older person because her Aunt Lena's bathrobe may catch on fire. But anyway, those are the types of things that we have to think about. So with that, I think we've reached our time limit. They're not going to close the doors or anything, and please take advantage of the food that's on the table behind you. And I think we'll close the formal talk, and we can answer any of your questions at the back of the hall. And thank you so much for attending. Really appreciate you all being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.